Thanks for coming, Charlie. Great to see you again.
Glad to be here. Is this about double what it was last year?
I think it just about double,
All
yeah.
right.
Great. Hey, I think most people know the name Autodesk, may not completely know what you guys do. Maybe you could give us a little bit of background on Autodesk and what the data team and your team is doing there.
Okay. Yeah. Autodesk. Most people think of Autodesk as the AutoCAD company, but we're in many more markets than that. So Autodesk is really the company you come to if you want to make anything. You want to make a consumer product, a building, a house, media and entertainment. We've won several Oscars for for our animation software, etc. And we've been making a big transition into the cloud, and as we do that, data is becoming a really big part of that. And so I run a team that's building out infrastructure and building out the data pipelines to be able to feed the data into systems like Looker.
Mm-hmm. So, I think of software companies, and it's been really difficult for large software companies to make this transition from sort of the old world to the new world to the cloud world and be a SaaS structure and change the whole way sales teams work and
Right.
how retention works and all that kind of stuff. I think like Adobe clearly did that very well, and I'd say Autodesk is the other one that really did that well, and there's not a lot of other examples, I mean, why is that, and what did data have to do with that?
Well, in a traditional company like Autodesk, we've been around for almost 35 years. We used to be very focused on annual release cycles and ship box software. And making that transition has a lot more to do with what Simon was talking about, which is really the culture. We had a lot of different teams that have been working in individual pods, in a sense, and not really communicating across. And so what the data democratization and bringing that together is really helping the teams to start collaborating better and having sort of common sets of goals. And so by really focusing in on that, we've been able to start really driving change in the business.
So there's this technological stuff that has to happen, and then there's this cultural stuff that starts to happen. I mean, maybe some examples, what have you seen work and not work? And
well, what's interesting, we have over 130 products, right? And so for a sales team to be able to go out and understand what to sell and when to sell it to a customer, or for our product teams to understand how our customers are best using the software or combinations of how that software works together, you can't do that without really having a picture into that whole ecosystem. And initially, it was really difficult because each of those teams had built up kind of what you call the wave two. Mm-hmm. They each had their own departmental silo around that information. And so being able to actually get access to that and move that into the bigger picture so that we can now look at the end-to-end life cycle of a customer from when they come to our website all the way through to when they purchase, to how they use the software and whether or not they're renewing the software. Mm-hmm. And that's all based on us being able to capture that data and make that data available to sales teams, product teams, et cetera.
So when you think about the different groups that start really being this kind of shift of culture, become more data driven, I mean, what are the groups that it sort of hooked into first? Where'd you get your sort of beachhead?
Yeah, so there's really two places I would say that people have been at least initially very, very excited around data, and a lot of that has been within the marketing organization, and it's especially because there are so many companies that have made software easy for people to get access to. I have this term YAD, yet another dashboard. We've got tons and tons of people coming in and saying, hey, if you use this, you can spike, you can do growth hacking, you can do this kind of thing. And so the marketing team's really engaged in that, but they tended to engage in a more, a non-cohesive manner. The other place has been in our product teams. Mm-hmm. When you're a desktop software company and you've got an annual release cycle, you think you do a bunch of research up front, then you plan your product release, and then you do your product. Now we're releasing on monthly cadences, weekly cadences, and even sometimes on daily cadences. And to do that, you really need to have access to that information. So the product teams really are looking at understanding, doing A/B testing, and understanding the products, how they're being used, how they're being adopted, and we can actually tune them in a more real-time way.
Mm-hmm. Now you started to do stuff pretty early on this whole Hadoop stack and big data, new databases, really new infrastructures and stuff like that. What do you think's going on in that world? I mean, what are you seeing work and not work, and what would your advice be to the folks here?
Well, what I would say now is that any company who's going, there's a lot of companies that are what we call born in the cloud, a lot of the new startups, a lot of the new companies, but more traditional companies like ours, we weren't born in the cloud. And so I would say that you're in a better position today than we were even 5 years ago, because the big players are starting to actually deliver analytics pipelines as managed services. So we did a lot of work deploying Presto, deploying Hadoop, building our own Spark clusters, managing our entire pipeline infrastructure. And we're now able to start moving some of those developers who've been managing that software into really looking at the data, managing trusted data, quality of the data, democratization of the data, and we're being able to push a lot of that core infrastructure development off onto Amazon and Google and those kind of companies. So it's really helping us to accelerate and work on what our core competencies are and not have to manage that infrastructure. So I think today with tools like the big vendors have, it's just making it easy for anybody to kind of enter that market a lot more quickly.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you think of in your organization, you're servicing the majority of the company, right? And you're trying to get data into the hands of people to make better decisions at the end of the day. I mean, it's about that. Like what are the big obstacles? Is this a technology problem? Is it a culture problem? Is it a management sponsorship problem? I mean, what do you really think?
I would say it's all of those at some level. We are definitely in the transition from what you called the wave 2 to wave 3. Mm-hmm. We have data breadlines. We have people that have in the past said, hey, if I control the information, I have job security, or if it's easier for me to develop this pipeline than it is for me to go work with you. So there's things like velocity. When you've got a really awesome group of smart engineers, it's often easy for them to just quickly solve a problem in a very bespoke fashion that doesn't scale for the rest of the company. And so it's really been that cultural shift to saying, hey, look, I'm willing to be a steward of the data that comes from my product and to put that into the company-wide system. And so throughout this transition, we've seen our management become more and more focused on making sure we're building out those data systems. And so my team has been receiving a huge amount of investment because that's where we're headed.
Mm-hmm. So we've traditionally had a lot of customers that were sort of born of the cloud, the new companies, right? And in the last couple of years, there's a lot of folks now here who are from, enterprise companies that have long histories, and some much more than 30 years, some 100 years, Like what would your advice be to the folks who have been doing this at that scale for a while but are trying to make this transition?
Definitely start with the managed service stack. And focus on getting data out to the nodes, right? One of the key things is around verifiable data quality. This is one of the biggest issues for us. You talked about the data chaos. That data chaos is probably spread rampant throughout those organizations. So start with some small wins where you start to consolidate the way you present those metrics and make sure that you've got a top-down view into those metrics, and then you can really start to build momentum around those. So it's really around getting to the point of being consistent and applying it to key areas of the business, whether you're focused on subscriptions, whether you're focused on retention, whether you're focused on specifically improving certain aspects of your product. Find one of those and then really start to dive into it.
Mm-hmm. Now you guys are doing some really cool stuff with data. I mean, some of it you can talk about, some of it you can't, but what does the future hold for Autodesk and data and some of the stuff that you're working on?
Well, the stuff that I'm most excited about, I mean, we're getting through the transition, like you said. We're sort of at the peak of that hill where we've got the infrastructure in place. We've got most of our products sending data into the systems. We're able to blend that with our back office data to start providing value. Now what do you do once you start having all of that information? you start to be able to do some predictive analysis, you start to be able to do some machine learning, et cetera, around that. So we've got some product teams that are starting to work on some really, really cool technology that's going to help our customers in the media and entertainment business, in the construction markets, and in the manufacturing markets. One example is we have a product that construction managers use on site where they're on their iPad and they're able to go out and look at incidents and things that are happening on site. They take photographs, they look at the weather, that kind of stuff flows in there. And by having a lot of historical data, we're able to start predicting where safety issues might happen. So we can actually save money and potentially save lives by using predictive models and predictive analysis to be able to understand safety, for example, risk on a construction site.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Charlie, thanks for coming out. I really appreciate you making the trip over.
Yeah,
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right.